He threw a kick to prove he was strong, but it ended up proving the opposite. He didn't even flinch. That's what people kept saying, over and over, like they couldn't believe what they saw. 1 second, it was just another ceremonial demonstration outside St. James's Palace. Tourists snapping pictures, kids on school trips pointing at the guards in their red tunics, and a few dozen martial artists standing around trying not to look nervous. The next second, a foot flew through the air. A crack, a stumble, and the kind of silence that feels louder than a shout. Brandon Mercer was the one who threw the kick. To the casual eye, he looked confident. Clean white G, short buzzed hair, sharp eyes that didn't blink much. But anyone who knew him would have seen it. The weight in his shoulders, the way his jaw locked just a bit too tight. He wasn't there for peace. He was there to win something, though he couldn't quite say what. The man who took the hit was Lieutenant Jabari Okoro, a guard whose uniform barely moved as he stood at ease, his eyes forward, expression unreadable. The moment Brandon's foot connected with Jabari's face, the air changed. It wasn't a brawl. It wasn't even a fight. It was supposed to be a friendly demonstration, controlled, clean, respectful. Instead, it felt like something sacred had been broken. Jabari stumbled back, not from the force of the kick, but from the shock of it. He hadn't seen it coming, not because he wasn't capable, but because he didn't expect someone to use a ceremonial demonstration to try and humiliate him. Brandon didn't celebrate, not yet. He just stood there waiting for applause, but none came. Behind the barrier, someone dropped their phone. An older woman gasped. A few guards along the line took a sharp step forward before one of the officers raised a hand to hold them back. Jabari's white-gloved hand touched his cheek briefly. Then he straightened his spine, fixed his hat, and walked off the platform without saying a single word. That silence? It said more than any punch ever could. Within 20 minutes, Jabari was escorted inside. Brandon was told the demonstration was over. There were no medals, no press interviews, just a wave of muttering, side eyes, and camera flashes that burned hotter than the sun bouncing off the marble behind them. The footage went viral before Brandon even got home. No sound, just a slow-motion replay of the kick, the stumble, the way Jabari swallowed it like it didn't even hurt, but still, somehow, looked broken by it. Everyone had their version of what happened. He lost control. It was a setup. Who the hell does a spinning kick at a ceremonial guard? Maybe he was trying to prove something. Maybe he just snapped. Brandon didn't speak on it, not yet. But the truth is, the kick wasn't about Jabari. Not really. It was about Brandon, about something he'd been carrying around long before that demonstration ever started. And what happened afterward? That was about what kind of man Jabari really was. But Brandon wouldn't understand that until much later, after the cameras stopped rolling and the crowd moved on to the next thing. Brandon didn't grow up angry. He grew up overlooked. Back in Toledo, Ohio, his father ran a tire shop, the kind where you wipe your hands on your jeans and keep the radio loud so you don't hear yourself think. His mother worked nights at a care home. They were good people, tired, busy, but good. Still, Brandon was the kind of kid people didn't really see unless he caused a problem. So he did. Martial arts gave him structure. Not peace, just structure. It gave him rules he could follow, and people had to clap when he won. That meant something. By the time he was 20, he had shelves full of plastic trophies and regional medals, most of them already dusty. At 26, he opened his own dojo in a strip mall between a vape shop and a tax office. At 30, the only students who still came regularly were kids too young to know better and men older than him trying to reclaim a piece of their youth. Brandon could still hit hard, still move fast, but he wasn't being challenged, he wasn't being seen. He started watching videos at night, fighters in Korea, military training in Tel Aviv, ceremonial martial arts from places he'd never been. One clip caught his attention. It was a short reel of Royal Guards in the UK performing traditional drills mixed with martial form. They weren't just moving. They were holding themselves like their presence meant something, like standing still took just as much power as throwing a punch. Then he saw Jabari, not in a match, just standing, still as stone. But there was something in his eyes, something that made Brandon's chest tighten, a confidence that didn't have to shout, a strength that didn't need to swing. That made Brandon mad, and he didn't know why. When he heard the guards would be participating in a public martial arts demonstration in London as part of a cultural program, he called in every favor he had. His friend Reggie, who ran an MMA gym in Boston, knew someone who knew someone in security. Within a few days, Brandon's name was added to the list of invited demonstrators. He booked his flight that night. The moment he got to the hotel, he went straight to the mirror, practiced his bow, checked his posture. He told himself it was respect, but he was rehearsing the moment he would take center stage. He wanted to be the one people remembered. Just a light spar, the coordinator had told him. No ego, no heat. Symbolic exchange. Brandon nodded, smiled, said all the right things. But inside, something hot and bitter kept rising. He'd spent years being polite, years following the script. And for what? A class full of dropouts and a Facebook page nobody checked? Standing across from Jabari that morning, Brandon had already decided he wasn't walking away without making an impact. "You sure you want to go first?" another martial artist had asked him just minutes before it all started. Brandon grinned. "Yeah, I'm ready." No one knew what was about to happen, not even Brandon himself. Because deep down, he didn't plan the kick. It wasn't a calculated move. It was something that came from that place inside him. The one that hated how quiet Jabari looked, how calm, how unaffected. Brandon thought he was about to make a statement. He had no idea how loud that statement would echo, but while Brandon packed his bag that night and avoided social media, someone else was being quietly pulled into a back room for a conversation that would change both their lives. They didn't call him the anchor for nothing. Lieutenant Jabari Okoro didn't talk much. He didn't need to. When he walked, people moved. When he stood still, it felt like the air had to work harder to flow around him. Not because he was trying to intimidate anyone, but because he'd trained himself to take up space without forcing it. He was born in Cincinnati, the youngest of three. His mother was a librarian. His father, a transit operator who barely missed a day in 30 years. Quiet home, tight house, plenty of love, but no time for nonsense. His dad used to say, "There's a time to talk and a time to listen. Most folks get the two confused." Jabari learned early which one he was better at. When his brothers got loud, he went to his room and practiced breathing exercises from old martial arts books he found in the back of the library. He started training seriously at 14, joined the military at 18, and eventually applied to a Royal Guard exchange program through a joint US-UK defense initiative. It was selective, only one American every 5 years. He was chosen in 6 months. Jabari didn't just train to fight. He trained to hold ground. He studied posture, presence, poise. He learned how to project strength through stillness. His mentors in the English Guard saw it right away. He wasn't there to shine. He was there to serve, and that made him rare. "Okoro," one of the sergeants had said during early training, "you don't blink when you're supposed to flinch." "What's that about?" Jabari just replied, "Not everything deserves a reaction." That stuck. By the time the demonstration event rolled around, Jabari had been stationed in ceremonial service for 2 years. He'd guarded foreign dignitaries, stood in the rain for hours without moving, and kept calm while drunk tourists waved phones inches from his face. He knew what the uniform meant. But that morning was different. There was tension in the air. Too many cameras. Too many men with something to prove. He didn't know Brandon personally, only heard the name an hour before the event. "Guy from the States," someone muttered while adjusting their belt. "Former champ. Thinks he's here to headline." Jabari didn't comment. He adjusted his gloves and waited for instructions. On the mat, he greeted Brandon with a respectful bow, deep, traditional, the way he had been taught. Brandon's bow was shorter, tighter, almost sharp. Jabari noticed that. Then the match started. The air shifted. Brandon moved fast, too fast for a demonstration. Jabari parried twice, then stepped back, giving space. That was when the kick came. A flash of white, heel, jaw. Jabari didn't go down, but something inside him slipped. Not pain, trust. He stumbled, recovered, adjusted his uniform, and walked off. Not out of shame, out of principle. He wasn't going to give Brandon the moment he wanted. He wasn't going to let a stage performance turn into a show of ego. Back inside the building, an officer approached him quietly. They didn't scold him. They didn't blame him. But the rules were clear. No physical contact from the outside world while on ceremonial duty. No exceptions. He was being relieved of uniform service until further notice. Jabari didn't argue. He stood there in a dim side room, uniform still pressed, hat in hand. His jaw ached slightly. His pride? Not so much. He called his mother that night, told her he'd be taking some personal time. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing serious," he said. "Just got reminded who I am." But even Jabari didn't know yet how far that reminder would go, or how quiet strength would speak louder than any punch Brandon had ever thrown. It was supposed to be a show of unity, a peaceful, symbolic moment between cultures, discipline meeting discipline in front of cameras and curious crowds just outside St. James's Palace, not far from where tradition hangs heavier than the air. The crowd was already gathering when Brandon showed up, early, hands in the pockets of his warm-up jacket, chewing gum like it was the only thing keeping him calm. A few guards were pacing, adjusting gloves, going over their rehearsed drills in silence. Across the cordoned-off square, martial artists from different schools stretched out on mats, some of them snapping practice kicks in the air. There was nervous chatter, a few light jokes, but underneath, something was off. No one really knew what they were walking into. Brandon scanned the space. He saw the flags, the journalists, a couple YouTubers live streaming. One of them caught him on camera and gave him a thumbs up. Brandon nodded back, smirking just a little. But his mind wasn't on the cameras, it was on him. Jabari was already in position, standing with a group of guards near the temporary platform. He looked untouched, unbothered, focused, like he was made for moments like this. Brandon hated how relaxed he looked. "Yo," a voice said behind him. It was a guy from a London-based kickboxing club. "They're pairing off soon. You trying to open?" Brandon cracked his neck. "Yeah, let's get it started right." They'd been briefed the day before. Keep it light. Demonstrate control. Show contrast in styles. Honor the platform. But Brandon wasn't here for contrast. He was here to prove something. Within minutes, they were called forward. The mic picked up faint cheers from the crowd, mostly tourists, not fully understanding what was about to happen. To them, it was a bonus attraction. Martial arts and royal guards in the same space? That's gold for Instagram. Brandon bowed quickly. Jabari bowed slower, fuller, like he meant it. Then they took position. The first few moves were clean, standard. Brandon launched a low sweep, Jabari blocked. Jabari countered with a slow, open palm motion. Brandon parried, a brief nod. Respect. Barely noticeable. Then Brandon shifted his weight, just slightly. Jabari saw it. His eyes tightened for half a second. His feet reset, centered, balanced, but he didn't back down. That's when Brandon threw it, a spinning heel kick, fast and high. No pullback, no intention of stopping. His foot whipped through the air and cracked across Jabari's jaw with a sharp pop. The kind of sound that cuts through noise like scissors through cloth. Jabari's head turned, his body shifted. He stumbled 2 steps, gasps, cameras clicked. Someone in the crowd said, "Oh my God." Brandon froze. Jabari straightened, fixed his coat, smoothed the brim of his hat. Then, without a single word, he stepped off the mat and walked away. People didn't know what to do. The announcer fumbled over the microphone. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's give them a round of, Brandon stood alone, breathing heavier than he meant to. He tried to smile, tried to play it off, but nobody clapped. Not really. One of the guards walked up and said something quietly to the organizer. The event was paused for schedule adjustments. But everyone knew the real reason. You could feel it. Brandon walked back to the waiting area, eyes following him like arrows. One of the martial artists looked at him and said, "What was that, man? It was supposed to be clean." Brandon didn't answer. He sat down and untied his belt slowly, his hands shaking just a little. Not from exhaustion, from something else. But what Brandon didn't realize yet was that this wasn't the climax of his story. It was just the spark, and the real fire was still coming. The video hit TikTok before Brandon had even taken his GI off. No context, no captions, just a slow motion clip of the kick, the twist of Brandon's body, the snap of his heel, the way Jabari staggered without falling, the way he looked like he absorbed it with his spine. There were 100 angles within the hour. Every influencer within 10 feet had caught it. Some clips were tagged "Royal Guard fails," others had Brandon Mercer KO. But the most viral one, the one that looped over a dramatic soundtrack, that was titled simply, "This wasn't part of the plan." Brandon sat in his hotel room later that evening, scrolling. He told himself he wasn't bothered. He even laughed at some of the comments. Yo, that guard got clocked. He ate that like cereal. Why did this dude come in like it's UFC? But the deeper he went, the worse it got. That was disrespectful. Imagine trying to embarrass a soldier in uniform like that. This ain't martial arts. That's just ego with legs. It wasn't just trolls. It was practitioners, coaches, even a couple of his old tournament rivals. One posted, "Control his strength." Mercer forgot that. That one stung. He shut his phone off. Back in the guard's temporary headquarters, Jabari sat alone in a quiet room off the corridor. His jaw was stiff, but the bruise hadn't bloomed yet. His uniform was still perfect. He'd already been pulled aside and told, gently but firmly, that until further notice, he was suspended from ceremonial service. Not disciplined, just benched, because the optics were messy, because he didn't respond appropriately, whatever that meant. Because sometimes, even when you do everything right, it's still your uniform that gets called into question. Jabari didn't argue. He understood the game. He didn't like it, but he understood it. A younger guard, maybe 19, sat beside him quietly and finally asked, "Why didn't you hit him back?" Jabari didn't look at him, just stared ahead. "If I hit him back," he said softly, "I would have made it about me." The kid blinked. "Wasn't it already?" Jabari finally turned to him. "No, that was about him. What happens next? That's mine." Across town, Brandon went to a pub, tried to drink the noise away, but it followed him like a second shadow. A stranger, mid-30s, square jaw, polo shirt, recognized him at the bar. "You're the guy from the palace thing, right?" Brandon nodded, unsure whether to smile or not. "Looked clean," the guy said. "But kind of messed up, yeah?" Brandon forced a chuckle. "It's martial arts, not ballet." The man shrugged. "Maybe, but that guy didn't even throw a punch." Then he walked off, and Brandon sat there, more alone than when he walked in. The next morning, emails came in. A few sponsors, nothing big, just local gear companies, asked to pause their collaborations. One of the parents from his dojo asked if the Thursday class was still on. They didn't mention the video, but the tone said enough. He looked at his reflection in the hotel mirror. He wasn't bleeding. He wasn't injured, but something was off. Something deep. He had thrown that kick to win a moment, and he got it. But all it showed the world was how badly he needed it. And the man who took the hit, he walked away stronger than before, but the part that would haunt Brandon most wouldn't be the backlash. It'd be what Jabari did next, because silence wasn't all he had to offer. Brandon thought the buzz would fade, give it a few days, maybe a week, and people would move on. That's how the internet worked, right? One bad take, one offbeat moment, then it all disappears under the next headline. But this one stuck. Clips kept circulating, only now they weren't just about the kick. They were about what the kick meant. Pundits on sports shows started chiming in. Former military guys, ethics panels, martial arts veterans. One well-known jiu-jitsu coach in Arizona posted a full breakdown on YouTube titled, "When Skill Meets Ego, Why Control is Everything." It hit 200,000 views in 2 days. Brandon watched the whole thing. He didn't blink once. The coach didn't even insult him directly. He just said, "Martial arts is about more than winning. It's about knowing when not to." Meanwhile, the messages kept piling up. His dojo's Instagram went from 5 comments a week to hundreds. Half supportive, half brutal. One message stood out. "My kid looked up to you. Now he's asking why you hit a man who wasn't even fighting back." Brandon didn't respond. He just closed the app. By Thursday, the dojo was half empty. Parents said it was last-minute stuff. Sickness, car issues. Brandon pretended to believe them. He still showed up, still cleaned the mats, still ran drills. But something about the room felt colder, like the walls were listening. Then came the email from the cultural committee that invited him in the first place. "We regret to inform you that your future participation in any affiliated events will be discontinued, effective immediately." It wasn't angry. It wasn't harsh. It just ended things. Brandon stared at it for a long time before quietly closing his laptop. On the other side of town, Jabari wasn't on parade duty anymore. His mornings weren't about perfect posture or palace rotation. He was reassigned to administrative work. Uniform off, civilian clothes, low profile. He didn't complain, didn't ask questions, but he noticed the difference in how people looked at him. Some pitied him. Some admired him. Some didn't know what to say at all. He kept showing up on time, kept doing the work. Then one afternoon, while sipping black coffee in the guardhouse break room, a captain stepped in and sat across from him. "You all right?" the captain asked. Jabari nodded. "Didn't think you'd take it like this." Jabari raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Quiet. No press. No rebuttal. No show of force." Jabari shrugged. "It's not my story to clean up." The captain tapped his fingers on the table. "You're right, but you've got more weight than you think. People are watching." Jabari didn't reply. That night, he went home and took off his shoes at the door like always, placed his folded blazer on the couch, sat down, stared at the floor. Then he pulled out his phone, opened the Notes app, and started writing. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't even a statement. Just thoughts about control, about the responsibility of presence, about how some moments aren't yours to prevent, but they are yours to carry. The next morning, he posted it. No hashtags needed, just words. Plain, honest, quiet. It spread faster than he expected. Even people who hadn't watched the original video started resharing it. A boxing coach in Philadelphia quoted it and added, "That's what a real martial artist sounds like." A taekwondo instructor in Austin sent it to every student in her school. And Brandon, he saw it too. He read the post 3 times in one sitting. He didn't click like, he didn't comment, but he didn't sleep that night either. But what came next wasn't written. It happened face to face in a place where no one was recording, and that's where the real story turned. Brandon thought about reaching out. He opened the message screen more than once, typed things like, "Didn't mean for it to go that way," or "Wasn't personal." But each time he deleted the words before hitting send, because deep down, he knew they were lies. He meant every inch of that kick. He meant to dominate Jabari, if only for a few seconds. And now, he was left with the truth, that he hadn't just hit a man, he hit the meaning behind him. The uniform, the moment, the silence. 1 week after the incident, Brandon showed up at Camden Martial Arts Collective, an old school run out of a converted garage behind a fried chicken joint. No Instagram, no hashtags, just a few mats, some scuffed gear, and people who didn't care what your name was, only how you carried yourself. Word was, Jabari trained there sometimes. Brandon didn't call ahead. He just walked in with his gym bag and waited by the wall. A couple of young fighters glanced at him, nodded without recognition. Nobody said a word about the viral video. Then the back door opened. Jabari stepped in. Hoodie, sweatpants, gym bag slung over his shoulder like nothing was different. He saw Brandon. Their eyes locked. 1 second. 2. Brandon stood. Jabari dropped his bag and walked over. For a moment, nobody in the room moved. It felt like everyone was holding their breath. Brandon spoke first. Quiet. Measured. "I shouldn't have done it." Jabari tilted his head. "Which part?" Brandon looked down. "The kick. The everything." Jabari nodded slowly. "You did it because you thought it'd make you feel bigger." Brandon didn't respond. "You trained to control your body, but you never trained to control your need, did you?" Brandon winced, not from anger, from truth. "I didn't come to fight," he said. "I came to apologize. In person, not by online, not for cameras." Jabari didn't speak right away. He looked around the room, then back at Brandon. "You hit me harder with that," he said. They stood there, silence folding over the noise of skipping ropes and pads hitting pads. Finally, Jabari stepped to the side and gestured to the open mat. "You're here," he said. "Might as well move." Brandon hesitated, then nodded. They stepped onto the mat together, bare feet tapping against old vinyl. No crowd, no lights, just breath and gravity. They didn't spar, not really. They moved slowly, measured drills, exchanges, breath control. Brandon kept it light, and Jabari returned everything with grace. No anger, no edge. After 30 minutes, they bowed. Brandon sat against the wall, drenched in sweat, staring at the ceiling. "You ever feel like you don't know who you are without the applause?" he asked. Jabari crouched beside him, thought about it. "I used to," he said, "until I realized applause is just noise. Purpose is quiet." Brandon let that sit in his chest for a moment. "What happens now?" Jabari stood. "That depends on what you do when no one's looking." And just like that, He walked off the mat. No ceremony, no handshake photo, just movement, presence. Brandon watched him go, feeling something shift inside. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. It was something harder, accountability. The kind that doesn't come with a clean ending, the kind that sticks. He didn't post about it, didn't try to spin the moment for his brand. He just showed up to the dojo the next day, and the one after, and the one after that. Fewer students, sure, but the ones who stayed, they started noticing something different. He taught slower, spoke less, asked more questions, and for once, he didn't treat every drill like a performance. He still had fire, but it was aimed inward now. But before this story closes, there's one last moment, and it didn't happen in a gym. It happened in a place where eyes watch, not with judgment, but with history. 3 weeks later, the guards were back at the palace. The tourists had returned. Kids still giggled and pointed. Families snapped photos in front of the sentries standing like statues. The routine hadn't changed, but for a few people watching closely, something was different. At precisely 11 Hunkwok a.m., the rotation began. Boots hit the pavement in sharp rhythm. The new shift stepped forward in synchronized motion. The crowd leaned in with phones ready, and there, walking in full ceremonial uniform, chin high, posture clean, was Lieutenant Jabari Okoro. Back in place, no press release, no grand announcement. Just there. Somebody in the crowd whispered, "Isn't that the guy who—" But nobody finished the sentence, because Jabari didn't need it finished. He didn't look at the crowd, didn't wink, didn't smirk. He simply stood, strong, still, present. And Brandon? He was there too, not up front, not with a camera, not to chase attention. He stood behind a row of tourists, hands in his jacket pockets, staring quietly, just watching. His eyes weren't full of pride or shame, just something closer to peace. When the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Brandon stayed behind, lingering near the side gate. Just as Jabari came off duty and stepped into the guardhouse, their eyes met one last time. No nod, no wave, just understanding. Brandon turned and walked away, not as the guy from the video, not as the man who threw the kick, but as someone who had finally learned the lesson most fighters take a lifetime to figure out. Strength isn't what you do when people are watching. It's how you carry the consequences of what you did when they weren't. Later that night, Brandon sat at his dojo in silence, lights off, just the hum of the fridge in the back and the faint echo of traffic outside. He sat on the mat, barefoot, facing the mirror. He didn't rehearse anymore, didn't pose, he just breathed. Then the door creaked open. A young student stepped in, 10, maybe 11, wore his belt too high and his jacket too loose. "Sensei?" the kid asked. "Are we still doing class?" Brandon stood, smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said, "we are." And he meant it this time. That night's lesson wasn't about punches or kicks or how to win a point. It was about control, about how real fighters walk away from noise, not into it. As the kid bowed at the end of class, he looked up and asked, "Sensei, what happens if someone hits you first?" Brandon paused, then answered, "Then you decide if you want to win a moment, or live with yourself after." The kid nodded like he understood, even if he didn't yet. But one day, he would. And Brandon? He didn't need to go viral to know he was doing it right. He already knew. There's a difference between being strong and needing to be seen as strong. One fades when the lights go out, the other carries you when no one's watching. If you've ever let pride steer you, or ego push you further than it should have, you're not alone. What matters is what you do after, whether you repeat it or grow. If this story made you feel something, think twice before acting out of pride. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that strength isn't loud, it's consistent. And if you've got a story of your own, tell it. Quietly, honestly, fully. Somebody out there needs it more than you think.